How do captains live on massive $13 billion aircraft carriers? 5,000 sailors, one floating city, and the person responsible for every single one of them gets about 4 hours of sleep a night. Being an aircraft carrier captain isn't just a job, it's operating a nuclear-powered city while managing a $13 billion asset that never stops moving. Most people think the captain has some luxurious suite with ocean views and a personal chef. But here's what nobody tells you. The captain's actual living quarters are smaller than most college dorm rooms, and they're designed that way on purpose. Because when you're responsible for 5,000 lives in a vessel the size of 3 football fields, comfort isn't the priority. Proximity to command is. Chapter 1. The 2 cabins nobody talks about. Let me break down something that confuses most people. An aircraft carrier captain doesn't have one living space, they have 2. And neither one is what you'd expect. The first is called the sea cabin. This is a tiny room located directly next to the bridge, and I mean directly. You can reach the command center in about 15 seconds. The sea cabin is brutally functional. We're talking a narrow bed, a small desk, maybe a chair if you're lucky, no windows, no decorations, just the essentials. Why? Because during operations, the captain needs to be on the bridge or within arm's reach of it at all times. When flight operations are running, which can be 18 to 20 hours a day, the captain is either on the bridge or in that sea cabin, ready to respond to any emergency within seconds. A fire on the flight deck, a medical emergency, a mechanical failure during a catapult launch, any of these can happen without warning, and the captain needs to be there immediately. The second space is the in-port cabin. This is slightly larger and used when the carrier is docked. But don't picture some admiral's suite. Yes, it's bigger than the sea cabin, but it's still modest by civilian standards. This cabin serves a dual purpose. It's where the captain sleeps when in port, but it's also used for official meetings, hosting dignitaries, and conducting ship business. So even this larger space isn't really personal. It's a working office that happens to have a bed in it. Here's the insider detail most people miss. The captain almost never uses the in-port cabin during deployment. During a 6-month deployment, that sea cabin becomes home. And when I say home, I mean a space roughly the size of a walk-in closet where you're trying to catch sleep in 2-hour increments between flight operations. Chapter 2. The day that never ends. A carrier captain's day doesn't start at a specific time because it never really ends. But let's say we're tracking a typical 24-hour period. The captain is usually up before dawn, around 0430 or 0500. The first task is reviewing overnight watch reports. While the captain was attempting to sleep, the ship continued operating. The night watch has compiled reports on everything: weather updates, mechanical issues, personnel problems, intelligence briefings, and operational schedules. By 0600, the captain is meeting with department heads. On an aircraft carrier, you've got multiple departments that function like city services. There's the Air Operations Department managing all the aircraft, the Engineering Department keeping the nuclear reactors running and maintaining propulsion, the Weapons Department handling all ordnance and defensive systems, the Supply Department managing food, parts and logistics for 5,000 people, the Medical Department running what's essentially a floating hospital. Each department head needs to brief the captain on their status. And here's the critical part: the captain must be in the loop on everything, not just the big stuff, everything, because if something goes wrong anywhere on that ship, the captain is ultimately responsible. After department head meetings, the captain moves to the bridge to oversee flight operations. This is where the job gets intense. Aircraft are launching and recovering throughout the day. Each launch involves a catapult system that accelerates a 30-ton aircraft from 0 to 165 miles per hour in 2 seconds. Each recovery involves a pilot landing on a moving runway that's only 500 feet long, while the ship is pitching in ocean swells. The captain doesn't personally direct these operations, that's the air boss's job. But the captain is there, watching, ready to make command decisions if something goes wrong. And things do go wrong. Mechanical failures, weather changes, medical emergencies. The captain needs to be present and ready to act. Chapter 3. The weight of ultimate accountability. Here's something that separates aircraft carrier command from almost any other job. The captain is accountable for everything that happens on that ship. Not just responsible, accountable. If a sailor gets in a fight in the berthing area at 0200, the captain deals with it. If there's a fuel contamination issue in one of the storage tanks, the captain answers for it. If a chef in the galley causes a minor food poisoning outbreak, that's on the captain's desk. If two aircraft collide on the flight deck, the captain's career might be over. This creates an environment where the captain can never truly relax. Even during the few hours allocated for sleep, there's an understanding that an alarm could sound at any moment. A fire, a man overboard, a security threat. The captain must be ready to respond immediately, which means sleeping in uniform or with clothes within arm's reach. Most carrier captains develop the ability to function on fragmented sleep. They learn to grab 90-minute naps whenever possible, rather than expecting a full night's rest. It's not healthy, but it's necessary. The ship operates 24/7 and the captain needs to be available 24/7. Here's an insider detail from former carrier captains. You become incredibly good at reading your crew's body language and tone. When a department head walks into your cabin, you can tell within 3 seconds whether they're bringing routine information or a crisis. You develop this sixth sense because you're constantly processing hundreds of inputs, facial expressions, voice stress, the way someone knocks on your door. It becomes instinctive. Chapter 4. The dual command structure. Something that confuses people outside the Navy. An aircraft carrier actually has two commanders. There's the ship's captain, who commands the vessel itself and is responsible for all ship operations. Then there's the CAG, the Commander Air Group, who commands the air wing and all the aircraft and pilots. These are two separate chains of command operating on the same ship. The CAG is responsible for all flight operations, mission planning, and pilot performance. The ship's captain is responsible for the vessel, the crew, navigation, and ship systems. In theory, they're co-commanders. In practice, when push comes to shove, the ship's captain has final authority. Why? Because the captain is responsible for the safety of the entire vessel. If the CAG wants to launch aircraft in marginal weather and the captain determines it's too dangerous, the captain's decision stands. The ship's captain can halt flight operations entirely if necessary. This creates an interesting dynamic. Both officers are typically senior captains with decades of experience. Both have massive egos. You don't get to that level without one. They need to work together seamlessly, but they're also managing different priorities. The CAG wants to maximize flight operations and complete the mission. The ship's captain wants to keep the ship and crew safe while completing the mission. Good carrier captains and CAGs develop a working relationship built on mutual respect and constant communication. Bad combinations create tension that ripples through the entire ship. And when 5,000 people are living in close quarters for 6 months, tension spreads fast. Chapter 5. The isolation of command. Here's something nobody talks about. Being a carrier captain is profoundly lonely. You're surrounded by 5,000 people, but you can't really be friends with any of them. You can't show weakness. You can't complain about being tired. You can't express doubt about a decision. The crew needs to see you as calm, confident, and in control at all times. Former carrier captains describe this as living in a bubble. The crew either fears you, respects you, or both, but they don't relate to you as a peer. Your fellow senior officers are subordinates. You can't vent to them about the pressure because that undermines their confidence in your leadership. The only person who truly understands what you're going through is another carrier captain, and they're commanding a different ship thousands of miles away. So you deal with the pressure internally. You make decisions that could end careers or cost lives, and you do it alone. This isolation is compounded by the fact that you're also isolated from your family. During a 6-month deployment, you might get occasional email access or rare phone calls, but you're essentially cut off from your spouse, your kids, your parents. You miss birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, and you can't talk about the stress of command because operational security prevents you from discussing most of what you do. Chapter 6. The skills nobody teaches you. To even be considered for carrier command, you need an incredibly specific background. You must be a naval aviator, meaning you flew jets off carriers earlier in your career. You must have commanded a smaller ship, typically a destroyer or cruiser. You need multiple deployments, advanced education, and a spotless record. But here's what they don't teach you: how to be the mayor, police chief, fire chief, hospital administrator, and CEO of a floating city all at once. The captain serves as the final arbiter for legal disputes. If two sailors have a conflict that can't be resolved at lower levels, it ends up at captain's mast, a disciplinary hearing where the captain acts as judge. The captain determines punishment, which can range from extra duty to reduction in rank to confinement in the ship's brig. Yes, aircraft carriers have their own jail. They have their own police force, the master-at-arms. They have their own fire brigade, their own hospital with operating rooms, their own post office, their own stores. All of these fall under the captain's ultimate authority. The captain also deals with morale issues. When you've got 5,000 people living in tight quarters for months, tensions run high. The captain needs to balance discipline with compassion, authority with approachability, push too hard and morale collapses, be too lenient and discipline breaks down. Former captains talk about developing an instinct for when to be visible and when to delegate. You can't micromanage 5,000 people, but you also can't be invisible. You need to be seen on the flight deck, in the galley, walking through berthing areas. The crew needs to know you're present and engaged, but you also need to trust your department heads to handle their areas without constant oversight. Chapter 7. The moments that define you. Every carrier captain will tell you there are moments that define their command. Sometimes it's a crisis, a fire, a collision, a medical emergency. Sometimes it's a successful mission. Sometimes it's a decision that prevents a crisis from happening. One former captain described a moment during night operations when weather conditions deteriorated rapidly. The air boss wanted to continue recovering aircraft. The captain made the call to suspend operations and divert aircraft to land bases. 2 pilots were furious. They wanted to land on the carrier, but the captain held firm. Later analysis showed that if they'd continued operations, the conditions would have likely resulted in a crash. The captain's decision probably saved lives and a $70 million aircraft, but in the moment, it felt like second-guessing your team and disappointing your pilots. That's the burden of command. You make decisions with incomplete information under time pressure, and you live with the consequences. Sometimes you're celebrated, sometimes you're criticized, but you're always accountable. Being an aircraft carrier captain is one of the most demanding leadership positions in the world. You're operating a nuclear-powered vessel worth $13 billion. You're responsible for 5,000 lives. You're managing complex flight operations, diplomatic missions, and potential combat scenarios. And you're doing it all while running on 4 hours of sleep in a room the size of a closet. The quarters aren't luxurious. The hours are brutal. The pressure is relentless. But for the select few who reach that level, it represents the pinnacle of naval command, the ultimate test of leadership, endurance, and decision-making under pressure. Most people will never experience that level of responsibility, and after understanding what it actually entails, most people wouldn't want to.